finish what we started last week, and then I want to go into something new. We talked about hope last week. Hope is really an important conversation, but the three things that I wanted you to understand from last week is that you become like Christ, and that's your hope. When you become Christ-like, that's your hope. When you understand that you are made in the image of God, and you become like Christ in your life, that's your hope. I mean, I can say it 1,000 times, and maybe that's what we need to do to get it, because it's really important we get that. And what that means is that when I become Christ-like, I have His heart, and I have His mind, and I have His integrity. And then everything that comes my way in life, I face it with those three things. I face life with His heart. I face life with His mind. And I face life with His integrity. Now, what does that mean for me? It means that when something comes my way, when someone is hurt, when something is needed, and there's something out there that I can do about whatever is needed, then I have His heart. When people came to Him and they needed something from Him, and He reached out to them because He had compassion in His spirit. And Billy is sitting right here on the edge, so I'm going to reach out to Billy, and He reaches out and He gives you what He has, and He shares it with you, and He has compassion for you. When you have something in your life that's difficult, He reaches out, and His heart is after your heart. He wants to do something to let you know that He cares about you. That's His heart. And when you have the image of Christ, you're reaching out to those people around you with the heart of Christ. And when there's a difficulty in your situation, in your life, when a situation is tough, and when people are not nice to you, and people come against you, and people say things about you that aren't true, and when they abuse you, and when they spit on you, and they strip you naked, and they hang you on a cross, you have His heart. And you say, Father, forgive them. Because you have His heart. Does that make sense? Amen. When somebody breaks your car in the car wash, those silly people yesterday fixing my car, I wanted it to look good for you, because someone gave me a bad time about my car at one time. So I've always wanted my car to look good on Sunday morning, at least on the outside, kind of like me. I look good on the outside. On the inside, needs some cleaning. But on the outside, I'm shining up pretty good. You hit it, right? You hit it. And when the guy grabs the thing, I'm in a truck. I have a big truck. And when you grab the handle, he pulls it off and he breaks the handle. And I take it back to him and I said, this wasn't broken when you started. And he starts yelling at me and he broke my truck. And I'm a pastor. And as a pastor, you got to let people kick you in the teeth sometimes, because they might come to your church and you might have to share Christ with them. So it's okay. It's worth it. So I have to sit there, and I finally say to him, sir, why are you yelling at me? You broke my truck. Why are you yelling at me? I said, I'm intentionally keeping my voice low. And I said, what are you going to do about this? And he said, absolutely nothing. I said, that's okay. You're going to be my lawyer. He doesn't know my lawyer is Jesus. That's all I listen to.
That's right.
Right? So I have to have His heart when people do things against me. And that they should take care of. It's His problem. It's not, you have to have His heart.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. And you have hope in your life, because you don't scream and yell and punch the guy out, and he punches you out, and then you end up on the front page of the paper, new pastor of Las Palmas Church goes to jail, and Billy bails him out. You don't want that, right? And then you have to have His mind. You see, the hope is that when you become Christ-like, you have the mind of Christ. And when you have the mind of Christ, you think like Christ. And so when something encounters your life, you don't have to drop to your knees automatically and say, Jesus, help me. You might feel that way, but sometimes you don't have a moment to drop to your knees. Sometimes things come to you so fast, you have to know what to do. And you have to know what to do like that. You have to have the mind of Christ. And so your hope is that you become like Christ. That's your hope. You don't put hope in anything else except that you have the mind of Christ. And so when something encounters you, you know how to think about that because you're thinking about that thing, whatever that thing is, with the mind of Christ. When your wife comes home and you've been messing up the house and you don't have it clean, you need the mind of Christ. You need the armor of Christ. You need a lot of things. You need the what? I didn't hear that. The maid of Christ. Yeah, you need to clean her up. That's right. And you need the integrity of Christ. Amen? It doesn't do us any good in life to have the heart of Christ, to have the mind of Christ, and not have the integrity of Christ. You can think like Christ, you can feel like Christ, but if you're a liar, it doesn't matter. You can think like Christ, you can feel like Christ, but if you're a cheat, it doesn't matter. Amen?
Amen.
It doesn't do us any good to have the heart of Christ and the mind of Christ if we don't have the integrity of Christ. So our only hope and the most wonderful hope, and when we say our only hope, it doesn't mean that it's a last resort. It means that it's the greatest thing in the world. Our only hope is that we become like Christ. And that's what hope is. That's the definition for hope. You become like Christ. And when you become like Christ, you have the mind of Christ. You have the heart of Christ. And you have the integrity of Christ. And you can face the situations that come into your sphere of life with such amazing power.
Amen.
Because you are like Christ.
Amen.
Amen? Amen. So that's kind of what we talked about last week, but I distilled it for you. And instead of talking to you about an hour, I told you in about 4 minutes, and you're going to say, well, gosh, Pastor, why can't you do that every week? Because I don't want to. But there's something else. When we have that kind of hope in God, when we have that hope, when we believe that God is making us like His Son, when we believe that we're becoming the image of Christ, and we talked about last week how that happens. When we believe that, I want you to get this next thing, and I'm really sorry that is your uncle okay? Is Elias okay today?
Yep.
Yeah, he's not. Is he not here? Right, Elias is in here. He's supposed to be right there. Where's he at? His place is empty. Bless his heart. He's okay. Lord bless Elias. But Elias figured this out last week, the thing that I'm going to talk to you about now, and he came and said, Pastor, I learned this today. I figured this out. And we hadn't even gotten there. I was so excited. Listen, faith. The week before last week we talked about hope. The week before that we talked about having a faith that was, you remember the word we used? Something.
Unconditional.
No, that would be different.
Unconditional.
Huh? Unusual. Who said that? Good job. An unusual faith. In order to have the kind of faith that amazes God, remember the faith of the centurion we talked about? In order to have the faith that amazes God, in order to have Jesus amazed by the faith that you proclaim in your life, in order for God to be amazed at the faith that you have to understand that you cannot have faith without hope. And I mean that. You cannot have faith without hope. And we need to learn that in the Christian community. We need to learn that our faith is based in something. It's based in hope. It's based in the promises of God. It's based in the conversation that God is who He says He is. And we have a belief in that. We have a hope in that. We have a hope that we're becoming like Christ. And when we have that hope, then faith comes from that. God is absolutely reliable. In Him there is nothing false. When you expose yourself to Him on a daily basis, when you expose yourself to His truth, and when you fill your hearts, and when you fill your minds, and when you fill your intentions with the hope of God, God's kingdom becomes absolutely increasingly real, and it becomes a fruitful thing in your life. You begin to understand how awesome God is, and you begin to understand how awesome God is, and you have faith in God because you're becoming more like Christ. And wasn't Christ the one who exhibited the greatest faith in His Father?
Yeah.
You understand? You can't have faith without hope. So you have to let that just sink into your spirit. You have to let that just overwhelm you. Every promise which has ever been given must be fulfilled. not will be, but must be. We have to get that in our heart. We have to understand that God, when He made a promise here in this word, when He made it, it has to be fulfilled. It's not this might happen, and not that this could happen. It is that it must be fulfilled. So every promise that is made in this word must be fulfilled. So when you have yourself being made into the image of Christ, when you have yourself being formed in the image of God, it's like the potter and the clay. And if you ever worked on a potter's wheel, it's the most amazing thing. I loved to do that when I was in high school. I had the greatest time. And you would make these amazing pots, and you'd throw the slab of clay down in the middle, and you would center it in, and you would make these beautiful pots. But if there was one little problem, if there was one little air pocket in the midst of that clay, when you took that off, and it might be beautiful, and you're looking at it, but if there was one little air pocket in there and you put it in the kiln to dry, it would blow up and explode, and it would mess up everybody else's projects, not just your own. Wow. And God says that He's promising you all of these things will happen. And He's promising you you're not going to blow up in the kiln. He promises to take care of you. He promises to prosper you. He promises to love you. John 10:10, He promises that. Every promise in the Bible has to be fulfilled. It not will be, but it must be. It's yours. And the only reason you don't take hold of it is because you're not letting yourself be made in the image of Christ. Because if we're in the image of Christ and God says it, then we absolutely believe it. Because we believe like Christ. We have the mind of Christ.
Amen.
Does that make sense? This is really important for us. Because God is going to do some great things. I absolutely know it in my bones. God is going to do some great things in this church. God is already doing great things in this church. We took off the bars. Some of you are going, yeah, there's a lot more that needs to be done. Amen. Show up. I got work for you. Did you like how I worked that in? Hope is the basis for faith. Listen to Hebrews 11:1. Faith is confidence. Faith is confidence that what we hope for. Faith is confidence that what we hope for, hope is first, will actually happen. I hope that I'm going to become like Christ. Faith says I will become like Christ. Hope says, I can't wait till I become like Christ. I expect to become like Christ. Faith says, you are becoming like Christ. And they work hand in hand in the way that your life gets developed. So don't give up. Don't get frustrated. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't start putting yourself down when you blow it. How many of you in here have ever blown it? The rest of you that can raise your hands, either you're deaf or you're lying. I'm just telling you. Because you all have.
That is true. Shame the devil.
Amen? Amen. The ones that raise their hands the highest said the loudest amens. I get that. Some people may ask what the difference is between hope and faith. Well, faith cannot exist without hope. And hope is the basis for our faith. If you do not have hope, listen really closely. If you don't have hope, you cannot have faith. If you don't have hope, you cannot have faith. If you don't have an expectancy, how are you going to believe that it's fulfilled? You have to have hope. You have to. No wonder the Old Testament says without hope people perish. Because they don't have anything to expect to believe in. Faith cannot exist without hope. If there is no hope, then truly what should we believe in? Hope is central. And it's central because it keeps our eyes fixed on God's promises. It keeps our eyes fixed on God's promises for ourselves. It keeps our eyes fixed on God's promises for our world. It keeps our eyes fixed on God's promises for all the things that lay in front of us. It keeps our eyes fixed. Instead of looking and so fixed on the problems of life, it keeps your eyes fixed on the promise of God. And when you're fixed on the promise of God, then God will do something with your faith. How often do you and I spend our our life fixed on and focused on and wrapped around the axle about the things of life. Amen?